I sometimes get the random urge to browse Kickstarter video game campaigns, and it didn't take long before I wound up doing a double take recently at this project. Nemunai, a survival horror game with a PS1 polygonal style which cites Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Tekken, which will make more sense when I explain it, and the Uzumaki series of Junji Ito as inspiration. You can tell it's inspired by the classics because it upholds the time-honored tradition of an important item being fished out of a toilet. This game is in its second campaign. The first one asked for about 1,500 euros and fell way short of that. Meanwhile, the current campaign has already hit its goal and some stretch goals, surging past both the first campaign's goal and this campaign's initial mark of 100 euros? There's an alpha version of this game available through itch.io, one put together by a dev team of 4 Spanish college students, and whether it was curiosity or my confusion overriding my urge to focus on my other massive video projects, I decided to give it a shot. A guy named Kaito gets a letter from his friend Reiko pleading for help. He hitches a ride to where she lives, the village of Nemunai, but as he enters the village and reaches Reiko's home, a strange evil overtakes everything and a massive tower appears in the middle of town. Kaito needs to figure out what's at the heart of this and escape, if that's even possible. I'll admit, part of what caught my eye with this game was the name. Nemunai sounds like a legit Japanese word, but, well, it isn't. It sort of looks like a way of saying doesn't sleep, or tired, or won't die, or something like that. And it's written in katakana in-game, which made it harder for me to get a read on, but I didn't quite get how the name fit with the theme of the game. Anyway, I'll try not to go in too hard on the demo, as it is an alpha, and it was put together by a small team in their free time over the course of a few months. Let's start with how it plays. Nemunai has the fixed third-person perspective, first-person control setup of an old-school survival horror game. But as far as combat is concerned, its initiation is like something out of an old-school RPG. Kaito has no combat options in the regular flow of play. Instead, if he makes contact with an enemy or hits certain scripted events, those send him to a one-on-one 2D fight against whoever or whatever he encounters. If Kaito wins, the enemy disappears and the game continues. I'll give Nemunai this. I kept playing it. I spent almost an hour on the demo, both trying to reach the end and experimenting with a couple parts of it. In terms of the game's foundation, basic premise, core mechanics, even how it controls, there's something strangely appealing about it. It's tough to get lost most of the time, both because some of the environments are more compressed or have a linear design, and because there are usually clear hints on where to go or the character outright saying he's going the wrong way, which could be a pro or a con depending on how you look at it. Since the game already hit its goal, I might as well go into what needs to be improved, and I'm going to distinguish between simpler fixes, which are primarily cosmetic, and more critical issues. For the former, the sound design could use some work in terms of making sounds sync up with their cues. Sounds like the character walking and running are noticeably out of sync with his steps. The sound for picking up notes is a choice. Why is that so loud for a non-jump scare? And the sounds the enemies make when getting hit can be pretty goofy. Many of them have that someone grunted into a mic and put half a dozen Audacity filters over the top of it quality to them. The game tries going for a low poly PS1 look, but there's a difference between how a low poly PS1 game looks and how a low poly game looks. Low poly PS1 games still make use of textures throughout to help liven up environments. Nemunai does this in spots, but where it doesn't, or where the textures are very light or faint, it takes away from what the game's trying to do in terms of atmosphere. It's unfinished, I know, but it's still worth bringing up. They did hit a stretch goal for visual improvements, so hopefully this is included in that. And then there's the English localization. I don't expect devs who aren't native English speakers to nail this, but aside from some times where the text just wasn't translated from Spanish at all, it was distracting at times and gave off that pretending to be human vibe. Just throwing it out there, my day job at least partially involves editing written works, and several of them have been from non-native English speakers. Drop me a line if you feel like it. Also, try not using generic modern PC fonts for the notes in books, and make sure the text for notes in books actually fits on the paper properly. Lastly, there's the character animations. Kaito himself looks alright, particularly given his non-standard movement animation. He looks back when backing up, swings his left arm more than his right when walking, and noticeably puts more weight on his right side when running. But then there's the enemies. The less human they are, the worse their animations look, particularly the snail guy. I get wanting to make that particular Uzumaki reference, but this really needs cleaning up. Now for the mechanics and design issues. In the first area in the game, two things immediately caught my attention. One, when Kaito has dialogue or text from inspecting an object on screen, it won't go away for several seconds and there's no way to override or cancel it. This means constantly having to wait to inspect or interact with another object or talk to a new person. Also, the interaction range for doors can be unusually picky. If I had a nickel for every time I couldn't open a door because I wasn't standing close enough to the center of it, I'd have enough nickels to insert joke here. There are technically puzzles in this game, in the sense that use key on door is a puzzle. Well, there is one combo lock to open, but the combination is written on the lock, so it's not a puzzle so much as a busywork lock for the sake of having a busywork lock. Some of the camera angles should probably be changed, or at least have their ranges before a perspective change altered. It's easy in a number of areas to completely lose sight of Kaito, or not be able to see the path he needs to take to reach the next part of the game. I admit part of that is due to me messing around with another problem I found. Invisible walls block off many of the non-critical areas in Nemunai, but some of them are surprisingly easy to slip past. In the village this didn't impact anything, so long as I could find a way to clip back into the place I was supposed to be, but later I got it to happen in a maze section, wandered around a bit, and accidentally found the event trigger to move on to the next section. The game's controls don't mention using the mouse at all, but there were multiple points where I could only progress by using it to click an on-screen prompt. The fighting in this game is primitive. There are 2 buttons for punching and 2 for kicking, and the game says to not repeat the same move over and over. I experimented with some punch-kick combinations, but eventually I realized I could just alternate the punch keys and quickly whittle down enemies' health. Said enemies also spend much of the fight backing away from Kaito, making the player the aggressor, which... who's trying to survive the horror here? Also, ducking lets Kaito or the enemies block everything with no chip damage. And the enemies perform short attack scripts, which makes it really easy to tell when they'll end up standing still and allowing free shots for several seconds. Speaking of, for the parts where Kaito is running around the village, there's no real threat. Sure, he might end up in a fight with one of the handful of enemies wandering around, although you can just run around most of them. But aside from one point where Kaito's trying to navigate a bridge of light over a bottomless pit, he's in virtually no danger. Even in combat, the idea that a guy like Kaito can easily punch or awkwardly kick everything to death doesn't exactly paint a terrifying picture. Finally, a tough question needs to be asked. Is this game taking inspiration, or just repeating ideas the developers like? Much of the plot mimics stuff from Uzumaki, like the townspeople being overpowered by whatever formerly dormant force lies within or beneath them, or the tower erupting from the ground as said force takes over. Some of the documents effectively read like part of a chapter of Uzumaki, and the promo art for the campaign includes a PS1 cover art mock-up with the names Junji Ito and Uzumaki on it. Hell, the art for the old campaign, new campaign, and even the game's Steam store page include what looks like Mr. Saito being warped by the spiral. Wait, Saito? Kaito? The friend here is Reiko. Uzumaki's main character has a cousin named Keiko. How close can someone get to the original work without risking a lawsuit? Or at least a takedown notice? Again, this campaign already hit its goal. It's not a matter of if the game happens, just whether or not it's going to be something more substantial than what the demo shows, and whether it's capable of extending beyond something more than that game made by people who like Uzumaki a lot. If not, then the development of this game could easily end up becoming a downward spiral. For the record, that's not an Uzumaki reference, that's a 9 Inch Nails reference, thank you very much.